You'll be able to see the slides. Those of you on Insta cannot see the slides. But if you go to Zoom with Dr. Marissa right now, you'll be able to see the slides. So let me share my screen. And then, all right, do you see the slides, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Now, all right, cool. So this book, Untangled, is a really amazing book by Dr. Lisa Damour. She is a psychologist and a therapist and really an expert in the unique creature that is the preteen and adolescent girl. Um, Her story is very interesting. So, as a child, she actually spent time with a student of Anna Freud in London, which led her to want to become a psychologist and a child development expert. And she really just has a wonderful way of helping us understand the patterns of their development through these stages in what she calls seven, I think she calls them seven threads. On the cover it says seven transitions, but in the book she calls them, I think, threads or
Yeah,
strands.
okay.
Um, but it's basically like all these ways that they're changing and developing, and how, if we can understand that as parents, we can see that this is a pattern that's normal. It helps us to not be so reactive and to not be so overwhelmed because we can see these things as normal. And there were several beautiful sort of visual metaphors, which I'm a sucker for in this book, that I really, really liked. So let's just dive in. But I'm going to start first by making sure, oops, that if anybody's watching this and you're not yet on the book club list, I would like you to go to theparentdoctor.com/book club and sign up. What you'll get when you sign up there is access to all of the book club recordings. Each time I read a book and summarize it, I also give you an actionable PDF because I know parents are too busy to read this stuff, but everybody wants to learn. Um, and as a child psychiatrist with 18 years experience who's treated thousands of families, I think I have some insights to be able to help you glean the most important things from each of these books that I've chosen. This is now the 23rd book club. We've been going almost 2 years. So there's a big resource and a portal there where you can watch all of these videos if you have time, or even just like get the PDF that gives you on 1 or 2 pages the key takeaways from all these books. So it's like a Cliff's Notes version of how to be the best possible parent you can be. And it's totally free. I have a podcast called the Parent Doctor Podcast. If you are on Apple or Spotify, please take a listen. If you like it, please give it a rating. And then now my latest offering is a monthly coaching program, group coaching program, where I am talking about different topics related to adolescent development, especially for parents of kids who have ADHD or anxiety. This is really my passion, is trying to help support parents to help their kids make it through adolescence without hitting major roadblocks that lead to major mental health problems. As a child psychiatrist, I'm sure you all know too, there's been a big rise in depression, suicidality, anxiety in teenagers throughout the world, really. And as parents, we really do need to learn new skills to help our kids make it through adolescence successfully with a strong sense of who they are. So if you are interested in joining that, that is paid, but it's absolutely worth it. I think if a parent did this for like 12 months, they would have so much more readiness and skills to handle these transitions and supporting their kids. So the sign up for that is theparentdoctor.com/TS for tween scene. And our next one is actually this Friday, and I'm going to be talking about smartphone readiness. So that's a good one to sign up for. All right, so these are those seven threads that Dr. Damour talks about in her book. The first one is parting with childhood. And as the mom of a boy who just turned 13, this is true for boys too, it happens like all of a sudden, right? And you're not expecting it. So this year at Halloween, he just suddenly wasn't interested in trick-or-treating, wasn't interested in dressing up. And last year he spent like weeks and months thinking about what his costume was going to be. And it hit me hard. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I shouldn't be surprised because he's 13. And at 13, I kind of also felt like, I'm done with that, mom. Like it's boring kid stuff. But I still wasn't prepared. And it didn't hit me last year that that was going to be like our last year trick-or-treating. So it's hard, right, when we are struck by these sudden, what seem like sudden changes in our kids, that they're parting with childhood, but it's totally normal. The second is joining a new pack. And again, this is necessary, right? They have to go out there and meet new people. It's an evolutionary advantage for the tribe when we were hunter and gatherers, for our kids to become more adventurous, to seek novelty, and to want to mate outside the pack, right? To expand the genetic pool. The third is harnessing emotions. The fourth is contending with authority, which I think is the most challenging thing for most of the parents that I've worked with. The fifth is planning for the future. Sixth is entering romance, which gives us all palpitations. And the seventh is caring for herself. So each of these strands represents a crucial area of growth that our daughters are going to go through. But we have to keep in mind, she's working on them all simultaneously. And so if she seems scattered and doesn't have it all together and inconsistent in her development and all these domains, we have to cut her a little slack because this is a lot to be doing all at once. And most of it isn't even conscious. It's like this biological drive that propels them to go through these things. And if it's a struggle for you, know that that's normal too, because it's not easy to endure this separation that is happening during this phase of their development. Hi, Clarice. All right, so the first strand is parting with childhood. And they reject childish things. So just like my 13-year-old son wants nothing to do with dressing up and trick-or-treating, although he did ultimately go. It just was very like last minute. Um, but suddenly, you might buy your daughter a gift or suggest something, and she's going to look at you like you have two heads and like, why would I want to do that? And it's because she is biologically driven to not want to identify anymore as a child. Things that she used to really enjoy and you might have enjoyed with her are now going to be feeling babyish, and she's going to want to distance herself from those things. And so we have to know not to take this personally and not to feel like she's being mean or inappropriate, unless she is being mean and inappropriate, and just say like, oh, okay, so it seems like that's not your thing anymore. No, just be willing to accept that she's changing and developing something new, and that she might not want to do things with you as much anymore. And again, that's normal too. I love this visual, and this never like I never thought of it this way, but you know how teenagers tend to spend a lot more time alone in their rooms, and often parents get kind of angry about that, or they feel like they're being rejected. And she said, think of it like practice. They are practicing to live without you. It's kind of like a practice dorm room. And I thought that's genius. That's a genius reframe because it really helps you be happy for them that they are wanting to practice not needing you anymore, right? That is a sign of their maturity, a sign that you've done something right, not that you're doing anything wrong or that they're rejecting you, but that they are preparing to be able to live independently without you. So they're practicing in a safe space of your home where you're still there. If they open the door, they can reach out to you. But we have to be there. And we're still the safety net. So this is really, I think the next slide. Yeah, this visual analogy I love. She says, we have to be like the shell of a swimming pool, understanding that our kids at this phase, they're learning to like swim in the deep end, right? And so they're going to go out there, they're going to swim and play with other people, they're going to have these great experiences and exhausting experiences. And sometimes they're going to come back when we least expect it. We've felt like, where have you been all my life? They've ignored us for days or weeks. And then suddenly they're going to be clinging to the edge of the pool to us for emotional support and connection. And we just have to be there when they need us. And then we also have to know, even though it feels so good and we've been longing for that connection again, that it will not last. And sooner than we would like, they're going to push off painfully and go back to swimming in the pool. And I thought that was really, really helpful because so many of the parents that I've worked with, especially of daughters, find this, I need you, I want you, I don't want you kind of dance that you end up doing in adolescence to be really hard to tolerate. But when you understand that, like, that's your job right now is to be the sturdy edge of the swimming pool for them, to just be there when they need you. And it's frustrating because often at this age, they want you at like 11 p.m. when you'd rather be sleeping. um, or they want you when you're just busy doing other things. And like our job is really to not lecture them or be upset with them because the timing that they need to take a break and to regroup with us is inconvenient for us, but to be that consistent edge of the pool that is there for them. It won't be long. They're just going to need to catch their breath and then go back out. So that's really what we need to understand they need from us at this phase. Strand two is joining a new pack. And this is all about the social connections. And really, this is where, in my opinion, the introduction of smartphones and social media over the last 20 years almost has really led to a whole new level of complexity in teenage development of a sense of self. Because naturally, friends become very central to a kid's identity, and their place in the social hierarchy is absolutely critical. But unlike when I was a kid, when it just fluctuated day to day and there was no video of my mess ups or goofs or, taboo things that I said or did, like that ended up haunting me for weeks or months later. Our kids are living in this digital age where something they say or do at school could really haunt them for days or weeks later, depending on how it gets shared, where it gets posted, and all of that. So, interestingly, there's two types of popularity that she talks about in the book, and this has been studied by psychologists. There's sociometric popularity. These are the girls who are well liked, respected, and trusted by their peers. They generally have strong social skills and healthy friendships. And then there's perceived popularity, and these are the girls who seem popular because everybody knows who they are, but they're often popular because they hold power. They may either be bullying, so they're feared. In that movie Mean Girls, there were those girls who had that perceived popularity, or they may be envied rather than genuinely liked. So if you ask young people in a school, like, who are the kids you like the most versus who are the most popular, there's some overlap, but it's not 100% overlap. So we want to raise girls ideally who would be sociometrically popular, the ones that people like. And hopefully the perceived popularity will come for good reasons, but not for not so good reasons. And it's our job as parents to point out when their friends might be doing things that are a little bit power enabling, using their power in a way that's maybe mischievous or problematic, or if they're doing things to draw attention to themselves in ways that might be unhealthy. And similarly for our own children, if we see that, it's our job to say, like, what do you think about that? How do you think people are going to view you? Are you being the best friend you could be? We want to teach them to be assertive and to still maintain safety with the pack. So, one thing that we struggle with as parents a lot is when our kids naturally, especially girl to girl, engage in some kind of problematic social relationship, some kind of friend drama, we can want to tell them what they need to do to protect themselves. Like, you have to drop this friend or you have to do whatever. But often we don't see the whole picture and we don't understand the importance of these relationships because, again, if your daughter is a student at school with all these other kids, it's not always so easy that they can just distance themselves from one friend and not talk to that person anymore. They're going to still see that person at lunch, see that person in their classroom. So they have to find a way to navigate this and set a boundary. So we want to make sure that we can help them model that middle path of, like, how can you assert your needs, your limits, your boundaries with people who might be problematic while still maintaining the friendship in a way that doesn't make you seem like a total outsider or like someone who can't get along with other people. I love that she gives these examples of safety. So we'll get to this more in one of the lighter chapters too, where she gives scary statistics about kids' behaviors like drinking, sex, drug use, all that stuff. But our job as parents is to make sure that we convey to our kids that safety trumps everything else. And that if they ever get into a situation where they don't feel safe, we give them some kind of code word. And she gave the example, like, you can have your daughter call you and say, "Oh, I forgot to feed the neighbor's dog." And then that's your code word to yell at her on the phone so her friends hear it. And then you come pick her up. And that's like her getting out gracefully from a situation that otherwise she might not want to, right? I love that kind of sneakiness. And then also you can let her blame you. She could say to her friends, "My parents are so strict, they'll kill me if they smell smoke on my clothes or if I come home and they think I'm drunk," right? So let you be the bad guy and talk to your daughter ahead of time, preferably in like middle school before these things are likely to be happening very frequently, so that you have that plan. And all of these things are not one talk that you have. They're kind of repeated short conversations. Best to have them when it naturally comes up because maybe you're watching a movie, maybe she tells you a story about a friend. Um, and best to just let it go before you become like the lecturing parent. Because she talks in this book about how girls, especially good girls, tend to put on this veil of acquiescence or veil of agreeability. I forget what she calls it, but basically, like, they'll just kind of nod and smile, but you'll lose them and you'll see it in their eyes. So we don't want to talk about it too long, but you just plant these seeds repeatedly and trust then that she will know that she can trust you if she gets in a tough situation. And we also want to let them know explicitly, like, good kids do get into tough situations when they're adolescents. That it happened to us, that happens to everybody. And we need to let them know, like, we're not going to judge you. We're not going to kill you. We're not going to take away every privilege you have. Like, the main thing is to keep you safe, right? All right, so strand three is harnessing emotions. I know this isn't really an audience participation situation, but if you have an adolescent daughter, you know that the emotions can become pretty intense unexpectedly. And that is, again, not a sign that your daughter's on drugs or crazy and it's not even hormones. It's just that she reaches a limit. And often we see that at the end of the day after school. She emphasizes that school will get the best of her, right? Like she's going to try to hold it together again because of the importance of that social hierarchy with her peers. She's going to work it to keep it together, not lose her cool, not lose her composure, stay funny, stay on. And then when she gets home, if she's had a tough day, which you may not know, she's going to dump on you and it's going to feel crappy. And we can then want to be like, don't talk to me that way or how dare you, but instead try to pause and just say like, sounds like you had a rough day. Do you want to talk about it? Or just let her know that you're there and you can see that she's not her best self. So I guess always assuming positive intent, always conveying to our daughters that we know them when they're at their best and what they're capable of. That's really going to go a long way in your relationship with your teen daughter. So, one of the great questions you can ask, and this is not just true for our kids, this is also true with our spouses and our friends and our siblings, but like when people are complaining or venting, it can be tempting, especially in a dynamic where you're the parent and they're the child, or you're the boss and they're the employee, right? Like when there's a power dynamic separation, to want to fix it and to have a solution. But a good thing to get into the habit of is to just say, do you want my help with what you're describing, or are you just wanting to vent? Because oftentimes our kids just want to vent. They don't actually want us to solve anything. And if we fall into that trap of trying to solve the problem, often we are met with anger and resistance and like vile words, right? So try to catch yourself when you are feeling like, oh, there's a problem and I need to save her, which is what we feel when we're loving parents, right? We don't want our kids and our daughters to suffer. If they present us with a problem, we want to help them. But if you feel yourself with that urge to come up with a solution or a suggestion, try to say instead, sounds like this is really hard for you. Are you wanting to just vent about it, or do you want me to try to problem solve and give you suggestions? And that way you're giving her the grace of agency to decide because she's trying to step into this role of being able to manage her own life. And you're recognizing that she has that ability and that she may not be wanting you to function like mom in that moment or dad in that moment. She may just be wanting to get it off her chest. All right. So externalization is a psychological term where unconsciously you act in a way to take your stress and put it on someone else. And she gave some really great examples of this. Say she's really upset about a test. And so she's crying at midnight and gets you to frantically email her teachers. And then she just starts saying, well, whatever, I don't care. And she goes to bed and you're like up all night stressed about it, right? So she's effectively externalized that drama and stress onto you. And if you find yourself freaking out or taking action on things and suddenly your child is telling you, I don't care, that's externalization. And what we need to do when we feel that happening, and often it happens before you even know it, right? You just get in there and at some point you're angry with your child for not working as hard as you are to solve the problem. When you find that's happening, you need to realize, oh, wait, I fell for the trap and pause before you take any more action and just ask like, am I acting on her feelings right now? Do I need to let her take over this? Again, it's that whole idea of trusting that even though she was overwhelmed and she tried to pass the hot potato to you to handle, that you can basically say like, yeah, that's really hard. I'm sorry. Like, you have this paper due tomorrow and you didn't work on it because you were really busy this week. Well, what do you think you can do? Get her to brainstorm what a solution might be, and then just trust that she'll do it. And we have to, again, normalize distress. Let her know, and I like this very much, healthy people get upset just the same way healthy people get colds. We only worry when one can't recover from being upset, when the distress becomes persistent and really problematic, and she can no longer pick herself up and communicate with the adults that she needs to help her. So when you deliver reassurance and kind of a conveying that that's a tough situation, but you know that she can figure it out and ask her, do you want me to brainstorm some solutions with you, or do you feel like you've got this? Or is there anything that I can do to help you with this? If she's assigning you something to do, that's different than just like freaking out and then saying, I don't care, and leaving it for you to deal with, right? So we just have to be conscious of that tendency towards externalization. Don't get upset, don't blame them. It's not conscious, but it's their response to overwhelm. And again, teenage brains are remodeling at a rate that is, there's no other time that our brains change as much except the first year of life, infancy. So it's a huge remodel, and the breadth and the depth of their emotions is growing tremendously. But the connections between their logical brain, which is increasing in its ability to think through and problem solve, and the emotional brain, which is increasing in its ability to feel different emotions and more intensity of emotions, the connections between those two are few and far between in adolescence. So they really need us to function as the patient, calm holder of space so that emotional brain and its reactivity can calm down and just say, like, I know you've got a staircase in there that you'll find. Let me know if you need some help finding it, right? We do not need to solve all the obstacles that come up in our teenage girls' paths. This is true for boys too. We just need to help her remember that she has the skills to solve the problems herself. All right, so this is if you want to book a coaching call with me, I do offer one-to-one coaching support. This QR code will take you there. You can find the link to this also at theparenttdoctor.com. I know that raising teenage girls and tween girls is not easy, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who needs extra support. So, strand four is contending with adult authority. And this is really critical. Around age 11, 11 for girls, it's a little later for boys, abstract thinking starts to develop. And that means your child doesn't just see things as they are. She gives the analogy, it's like in The Wizard of Oz, the movie, where Toto pulls back the curtain on the wizard. So this is when we fall from grace in our kids' eyes and we no longer are the parent who knows everything, the person who is the authority. Suddenly they start seeing all the hypocrisy in the way that we live and in the way politics works and in the way the country is run and all of these things, and they get mad about it and they have crystal clarity about it. This is really sometimes hard to deal with because they're often very vocal in sometimes disrespectful ways about it. But it's also a really great thing because it gives us an in with our kids to help them as they are challenging adult authority to get upset about certain things. So, like, for example, social media, right? And the algorithms that are promoting all of these things to young girls and what they should think about how they should look, who they should be, what kind of a people pleaser they should be. Like, we can get our girls on board with being pissed off about that and wanting to reject it. But it's all in how we approach it. If we come and say, like, you're not allowed to do that because of this and this, and we're lecturing them, they're going to just shut off and not listen to us. But if we ask with curiosity and respect to them, like, hey, I read this article about Meta and Instagram and how they promote these things. And if you, these girls are getting eating disorders because if they look at one thing, it'll just show them more and more images of really skinny girls. Like, what do you think about that? If we get them thinking critical and get them to embrace their natural tendency to contend with adult authority, we get them on our side and we end up on the same side. And we get them to have the ideas about how they want to live and how they want to set boundaries. A good quote from another therapist who works with teenagers, and I have seen this too, is so what does a girl have to do around here to get grown-ups to act like grown-ups? As clinicians, I can really relate to what she wrote about here. She discusses in this chapter the natural, unwitting tendency that some parents have to become helicopter parents, meaning they may not have intended to become enabling parents, but, and again, cell phones kind of dragged us into this. If you have an anxious child and around the age of 12, they get a cell phone, and then they start texting you when they're at work every time something's not right, their lunch isn't right, they're going to starve, the teacher's being mean, this friend is doing something, whatever. And you, because you love your child, without consciously realizing it, start responding and saving them all the time. You set yourself up for a really problematic relationship and a very underdeveloped daughter's ability to set boundaries for herself and to tolerate distress. So this whole contending with adult authority, our role in it is to tolerate and almost encourage our daughters to be upset with us for not being all that we could be for them. Because again, they do want to separate. They don't want to be kids anymore. They want to be independent. But at the same time, they know they need us to be that pool frame for them and to be there for them all the time. So there is going to be conflict here. And what we have to do is just let them know they can do it. We trust them, we're here for them, but we're not going to do it for them. The analogy I also use is imagine yourself as a personal trainer. Like if you were a personal trainer and you wanted to help someone build muscle, they're not going to build any muscle if you lift the weights for them. Even if you just do it over and over to show them how to do it, it doesn't work, right? They have to do it themselves. And even if you've done it a million times and you can lift a really heavy weight and they can barely lift their body weight, they have to start where they're at. And it's the same for our daughters. So that might mean the first time your daughter fails to plan her time well and doesn't do her term paper and is crying at 11 p.m. because she's got 1 page out of 10 written and it's due in the morning, that you are going to have to tolerate her failure or at least the possibility of her failure, and not lecture her and not be mad at her and just be with her in that shitty feeling of like, man, this sucks. I'm so sorry this happened. She's not in a place at that point that you can get her to use her logical mind and try to plan how she can do this differently next time. No, in that moment, she just needs you to help her tolerate the distress of the emotion, understand that you trust she's going to do better in the future, that she's capable of doing better in the future, that this one bad grade will not mean that you think she's stupid or that she's going to fail or that her life is over. We don't want to lecture in that moment, which is what many parents tend to do because we think, oh, if we shame them, next time they'll do better. But that's not how it works. We have to trust that they were doing the best they could. They fell short, they feel shitty about it. And us making them feel bad about it isn't going to help anything. We have to recognize they were doing the best they could. It's a bummer that they didn't meet the goal that they wanted to meet. And now it is what it is. So what are you going to do now? Right. And then help them calm down enough that they can then come up with a plan, whether that's emailing the teacher, having a come to Jesus moment where they just tell the teacher, like, I didn't get this done. Can I have an extension? To which the teacher might say yes or might say no. That's okay. And there might be a lot of tears, and it might be really hard for you not to rescue that situation, but she won't grow in her ability to tolerate her own distress and trust that she can get out of distressing situations unless we step back and stop rescuing. And it's to be expected that during this adolescent period, there's going to be many of those opportunities for growth. And the hard part for us is to be able to sit back and watch them struggle. All right, so strand 5 is planning for the future. At some point, your child has to own their own schoolwork and their own future plans. So my first tween scene was earlier this month, and I talked about my approach with homework. It's a little extreme, but for both of my kids from the very beginning, both with my conversations with them and their teachers, I explained I will have nothing to do with homework. If my child is going to be a good student who does their homework, that's between them and the teacher. And so I tell the teacher, in America, I don't know if it's the same in Australia for you Aussies, but like there's been a big trend to have kids as young as kindergarten getting homework, especially in private schools where parents are paying because the expectation is you want to get your money's worth of education, right? Um, but statistically, it's been researched, there's no correlation between homework completion and homework success and academic success until about high school. So personally, I have nothing invested in whether my kids do homework until they're in high school. And I view this entire runway up until 8th grade as their timeline to figure out like what kind of a student they want to be and how are they going to interact with their teachers when homework doesn't feel appropriate. Like if they're assigned something that they already know and it's boring for them, it's up to them to respectfully tell the teacher, like, I didn't find value in doing this assignment. Or if they're assigned something that feels too hard, it's up to them to reach out to their teacher and say, I had no clue how to do this. Can you help me? And I let them know I'm here if you need me between the hours of 6 and 7 p.m., but I'm not going to be up at 10 p.m. with you doing anything. And I'm not going to be available on the weekends. Like, and sometimes I will just ask my younger one, my older one now, he's got it down, but my younger one who's in like 3rd grade, she really didn't do homework in 1st grade. Something clicked for her in 2nd grade, and she started sitting down when she came home from school and said, like, Mom, I better do my homework because someday I have to get a job and I need to know these things. I was like, great. And now I will ask her every once in a while, like, do you have homework? And she'll be like, yeah, but they have homework that's in a packet that's not due until the end of the week. And so she kind of tends to procrastinate. And it is what it is, right? Like sometimes there's tears and sometimes it's incomplete, but she's learning, right? So our role as a parent is to just trust that our kids can figure out what they need to do academically and to also not panic when they mess up along the way and they stumble and they get some poor grades or they don't turn things in. Like that's also part of it. Too often I see parents playing the role of the executive functioning coach or the scaffolding, or even in some cases, extreme cases, like doing the work for the child because they can't tolerate the possibility that like this will lead to a poor grade. In the parent's mind, an anxious parent will think like, well, this poor grade in sixth grade is going to lead to not getting into the high school that she should get into, which is going to lead to not getting into the college that she needs to get into. And so they catastrophize this whole thing. None of it is true, but it's how our brains work. And so we have to really stand back and trust that they will figure out what their relationship is with learning and academics in a way that's right for them. And we have to also trust that not everybody is a wonderful academic. I just watched this wonderful interview with Anthony Hopkins. He's like this amazing actor. He was apparently an atrocious student, like failed all his classes. So I think we have to trust that like there are people who have a lot to bring in terms of value to the world in different ways that may not be the world's best math student or essay writer, and that's okay. That said, if you have a child who's really trying their best and really struggling, if you feel like she might have differences like a learning disability, dyslexia or dysgraphia or ADHD or some other problem like that, certainly advocate on behalf of your child. Talk to the teachers, trust the educators. Educators see hundreds of kids over the course of their careers. They will know very well if your child is an outlier in terms of how they're doing, and they will have ideas on how to further support your child. So not every child has it easy. Some kids really do struggle more and they will need more support. But that doesn't mean, again, that you can do it for them. It's the same as, I don't know, it's not as easy for a person in a wheelchair to complete a marathon as it is with a person with two functional legs. But you can't push them and give their body the same workout that they're going to get if they become a wheelchair marathoner, right? So whatever the issue that your child may have, she or he has to figure it out on their own, what's going to work for them. It might mean that it's going to take them longer to get to that place of independence. That's fine, whatever. We're all on our own timeline, right? All right, step six, strand six, entering the romantic world. This one gave me palpitations. So, the main thing is we want to help our daughters not to lecture them and tell them what they need to do, but to understand what they want. Often we talk to our daughters about the risks that they're facing, but that's important, certainly getting them thinking about the risks. But further than that, we want to make them know what is it that you want, what's going to feel good to you, so that they can know, is this what I want or is it not what I want? As women, I think often we tend to be pleasers. And again, in that social hierarchy that's so complex in adolescence and high school, it's very easy if there's a girl who's getting attention from a popular boy to feel like that cachet and her social status is worth maybe treatment that's not the ideal treatment. And again, this is a tough one because here, this is something that your daughter might be comfortable talking to you about, or she might be comfortable talking to some other adult about. And I really like the idea of finding friends or families that have kids the same age as yours and letting your kids know, if there's ever something that you don't want to talk to me about, you can talk to Miss So and so or Mr. So and so that they know that there's other friendly, trustworthy adults that they could talk to if they or their friends ever got into trouble. When it comes to sexuality, though, and sexual development, she talks a lot in this chapter. This is a chapter worth reading, actually, and it's only a few pages long, about the prevalence of pornography. It was a little bit shocking. Like the majority of kids are going to see pornography. So even though we are going to assume that they don't or hope that they don't, we have to assume that they will. And I can tell you as a child psychiatrist, especially during the pandemic when there was a lot of unsupervised time on screens for kids because they had to be on screens. There was a lot of really young kids exposed to pornography. So be aware that, especially if you have young kids who have friends who have older siblings, like kids alone with screens, probably going to end up on porn at some point. And for girls, the story that I hear often is that boys think that that is a normal sex relationship and tend to want to replicate those sexual acts in their relationship, tend to objectify girls, tend to ask girls for photos, sex, and those kinds of things. So these are really uncomfortable conversations to have. But she gives a lot of great examples in the chapter of kind of talking points where you can say, like, hey, I heard on this podcast that sexting's become really popular among kids. And I was just wondering, like, if any boy ever asked you for a picture of your body, like how would that make you feel? Or do you know anyone that that's happened to? Just to get them thinking. And again, these are conversations that ideally happen before we're really going to feel comfortable with it when our kids are pretty young. I actually had the first big sex talk I had with my son was, I think, almost 2 years ago. And he's a good kid. He's a very caring kid. He's not a kid who's going to do crazy things, I don't think. But here in Los Angeles, there was a situation in middle school where some boys got a picture of a girl, just a regular dressed picture of a girl, and with some AI deep fake tool, which, those tools have only gotten better in the last 2 years, they somehow made a pornographic video that looked like this young student peer of theirs was in the pornographic video and shared it with the friends at school, and it made the rounds. And of course, this young girl was devastated. They got expelled. It was a whole thing. Now, as a child psychiatrist who's taking care of a lot of wonderful young kids, especially boys with ADHD, I can totally see how this would happen because in the moment, adolescents' brains overestimate reward and underestimate risk, and the chances of them doing stupid stuff goes way up when they're together. So I can just imagine this group of young boys like thinking this is hilarious in the moment and completely failing to put themselves in the shoes of this girl. And I felt that I needed to talk with my son about what is porn, what is this, why you would never do this, why if your friends want to do something like this, you have to speak up and say something. And he looked at me like, yeah, mom, I know, like I would never do that. But again, there's a difference between what our kids will answer to us in the moment or how they would respond on a test about what's the right behavior and how they're going to respond in the moment with their friends around them because their brains calculate the equation differently when they're in the presence of their peer group. So all of this for our daughters is just about making sure that they understand and talk with you about their body image, about themselves as sexual beings, about how they can feel comfortable with what they want and be connected to what they want, and knowing clearly also what they don't want and having the strength of character to be able to let people know that. Um, yeah, she gives a lot of like really good scripts that you can use to talk with your daughter if she ever feels like she's in a pressured environment, just like those ones she talked about of like they can call you and say, I forgot to feed the neighbor's dog, and you can imagine like similar things that they could use. So this is a good chapter for all of us to actually read through. All right, the last strand is caring for herself. This is the veil of obedience that she was talking about. And as a clinician who's worked with a lot of young girls, I know this very, very well. So well-meaning parents will talk to their kids and kind of lecture them and try to get them to understand what it is that we're trying to teach them. And then you'll see these girls going, and you see the veil of obedience coming over them, right? They become just like very agreeable, yeah, yeah, but it's going in one ear and out the other, and you've lost them. So she says that she likes to talk to teenage girls about this. And when she brings it up, they're all like, oh, yeah, I totally do that. Like they know exactly what she's talking about. And I remember doing it myself as a teenager. So instead of lecturing, and instead of going on and on, we really want to have multiple short conversations. And the minute your spidey sense catches that like you're kind of losing your daughter, that's the time to just let it go. I think often we feel like we have to have the whole conversation or talk about all these aspects in one go. And that's not the case. It's better to have short conversations. It's better to talk about general things about in terms of caring for herself, like our goals are that our kids are going to learn to take care of their bodies and eat well and sleep enough and all of this, right? But the reality is, most adults don't even do that very, very well, right? So we have to walk this fine line between letting them know what we've learned and what we've found out, how you can find out good data, and also talking about what we think about the misinformation that's out there on these things. And then we also have to be very conscious of walking the walk. Again, when it came to, challenging authority, if we're hypocritical, if we're telling our daughters that they can't have their phones in their bedrooms and we're going to sleep every night scrolling social media in our bedrooms, or if we're telling them no phones at the dinner table, but we are taking work phone calls at the dinner table, that is not okay. So we really have to decide together with them, hey, I know that like blue light from the phone screens can really disrupt sleep. Like, what do you think we should do? Maybe you set up a place. This is what we do in our house. Like, we have a charging station, so the phones go in there a couple hours before bedtime, and they're not in the bedrooms with us. And that makes it much easier. Now, years before my kids even have their first phone, they've seen us doing that. And I hope that therefore, when they get their phones, it's not going to be such a battle for them to not take it in their rooms as well. But we also have to accept that, like, just like we did, they're probably going to do some unhealthy things first before they figure out what works for them. And this is just human nature, right? Like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Like, you can talk to your kids about healthy eating, about drugs and alcohol, about exercise, about getting enough sleep, about drinking enough water, but they are going to have to learn these things through their own experience. And so I think the sooner that we can just tell them, like, experiment with yourself, see what happens, keep track of it, keep a log when you see you drinking your water, drink lots of water and see how you feel that day. Like, maybe I've heard that sometimes you think you're hungry, but you're really thirsty. So if you feel like you have a day where you're snacking too much, try drinking some water, see what happens. Like, you can just plant these seeds to give them the control, to make them feel like they have the reins of agency in their life, which is really important. When it comes to nutrition, there's a whole part of this chapter that's about how we should talk about food. We want to be very careful. And again, as a psychiatrist who's treated young people with severe eating disorders are scary. They're not to be messed with. I think she does a good job in here. If you really have any concerns that your daughter's eating is problematic, please act sooner rather than later in getting professional help, starting with your pediatrician. Eating disorders caught early are relatively easy to reverse, but eating disorders that go on for a long time are really difficult to reverse and are the most fatal of all mental illnesses. About 20% of people with anorexia will die as a result of their illness. It often takes years, but there's depression, suicidality, and then just the effects of restricted eating on one's body is extremely taxing. So don't mess around with that. She talks a lot about, we want to be mindful about healthy eating, but we really want to focus on what you do to be healthy, like the positives, like the foods that you eat, the actions that you take, the exercises that you do, how you move your body, more so than we talk about the things that you don't do or the ways that you restrict. So it's much healthier to talk about, like, what a healthy plate looks like and what a balanced meal looks like and how to understand your body's signals of satiety and when you're full than it is to talk about, like, how many calories you should eat or how many grams of sugar this thing has, or talking about macros with kids, I don't think is useful. And another interesting thing about this chapter was there was a study, I guess, in Fiji where I just went to Fiji this year, so it made me happy to see this study. But the natural body habitus of a Fijian woman is a pretty, like, sturdy body. They're beautiful, but they're strong. And they actually were able to study before the introduction of American television and kind of in media and thanks to Fiji, how the women there viewed themselves and how many of them were dieting versus after. And so this whole question of, is it the chicken or the egg? It absolutely is all of the messaging that we as women get about what a, sexy, beautiful, healthy woman looks like, the size that you should be. All of this stuff does impact how many women are dieting. And it's shocking. Even my daughter, we don't talk about dieting. We don't talk about macros. And in her class in second grade, the kids started reading labels and talking about how many grams of sugar were in things. And while I don't think it's horrible to have an awareness and not want to eat sugar all the time, it definitely sort of raised a red flag for me that if the girls in second grade are talking about sugar and shaming each other for eating sugar, like, what is that going to be like in a few years? So I think, again, when it comes to healthy body image, healthy relationship with one's body, we just have to be really aware of the words that we use and the way that we model our own relationship with ourselves, especially as mothers. All right, so at the end of each chapter, I love that she gives us signals on, like, when to worry and when to just breathe and breathe through it. So the main things that she talks about are, we discussed in the emotion distress chapter that, like, teenage emotions are kind of all over the map. So that makes it really confusing. Like, so when should I be worried about my kid? So if a child is having sadness or anxiety that is present more often than not for weeks, or if it's interfering with daily functioning, or if it is including any thoughts of self-harm or self-injury, then that's a concern. So your child may be having days where she's in tears, But if there's also a lot of times when she's happy with her friends, it's probably not that concerning. Social isolation and bullying. She says that you really only need one good friend in adolescence. So if your daughter doesn't have a whole boatload of friends, that's fine. But if she doesn't have any friends, that's concerning because kids really do need to be part of a pack. They need to be outside of the family and have those relationships in adolescence. If they're only relying on their romantic relationships for their self-esteem and their sense of self-worth is very fragile and dependent on whether the relationship is going well or poorly, that's a red flag. And if they're being bullied, that is definitely something where you do need to intervene because bullying has been linked to mental health problems in adulthood and in teen years. It is absolutely something that we have to step up and become part of. So that is the one exception to when you should step in and solve a problem, even if your child is telling you, no, I don't want to, or I don't want your involvement. Don't take any bullying lightly, including online bullying and things like that. I already talked about the eating disorder warning signs and how important it is to really be on the lookout for that in young girls because of all the messaging that we get about our bodies and what they need to be. If your child starts restricting, if they make a drastic change in their eating habits, they suddenly become vegan or vegetarian or refusing lots of meals, doesn't necessarily mean, oh my gosh, your child's anorexic, but it does mean you need to keep a close eye on that and have a low threshold for bringing them in for a further assessment. And then finally, if they are not able to care for themselves, by the time a child is in their late teens, she should be able to manage her basic hygiene, her sleep, and her health more or less, right? Because we want them to be able to launch soon. Like you want them to be able to function independently. She gives some examples here of girls she knew and families she worked with where in the last year of high school, this child was making it very clear that they were not ready and almost acting out more to show that like they couldn't get up to go to school and were missing school. Um, were staying up all night and like not doing homework on time and all these things. If your child isn't able to sort of manage those things by the time they're 17 or 18, don't just assume that by sending them off to college, it's going to solve itself. It's probably not. It probably means you have a child who needs a little bit more runway, a little bit more time. Everyone's on their own timeline, and that's okay. And you might need some support to get them there. I can't read the bottom of my thing here. Oh yeah, when in doubt, consult a therapist. Great. All right, so simple scripts, and I'll include these and more in the PDF that I give you all. That first one we went through, like when you hear your child venting, when they've held it together all day at school and they come home, they're just like pooping all over you verbally, just be like, man, that sounds tough. Like, are you looking for me to help you solve this, or do you just need to vent? Get that clarity from them. I love this question too. If they're just mad at you, nothing you're saying is going right, none of your suggestions or, attempts to make her feel better is working, just say like, is there anything I can do that won't make this worse? That shows that like you trust she's not going to feel this way forever. You recognize that you're failing in the moment and you're not upset about it and you're not blaming her. Now, here when it comes to boundaries though, a good thing to say if your child is really acting out inappropriately, and we do need to say this too, because this is that whole testing of how far they can go. Um, we can say, like, look, you might feel really awful right now, but you are not allowed to mistreat us in that way. So if your child is saying really hurtful things or doing very disrespectful things, like that is not okay. Behavior that's not okay remains okay, even though they're a teenager and even though it's hard for them to manage their emotions. We have to hold that frame of expectations. And it's okay to calmly tell them, like, no, you can't talk to us that way. If you need to calm down, please go to your room and come back when you can speak more respectfully. I love this. You can always blame me if you need an excuse to leave a situation. So she talks about like, let you be the bad guy, not the other kids be the bad guy. Let you be the bad guy, not the drugs or the drinking that's happening at the party be the bad guy. So let your child blame you, not the situation. And then make sure you convey repeatedly throughout their early adolescence and later adolescence that their safety comes before any rules of our house or any expectations of your behavior. Like that's the most important thing. And then I think it's also that pool analogy, just letting them know I'm here whenever you want to talk, no judgment. So if they're coming to wake you up at midnight, you really don't want them to, but like try to let them know that you're there for them. And if there's a time where they really want you to be there for them and you just can't be, that's okay. You're human. You can say, like, I see that you really need me right now. I wish I could be there for you right now, but I'm so sorry I can't. Maybe you have to run to a meeting. Maybe there's something going on in your personal life. And you say, like, Can we please pick this up in an hour or when I get back? I promise that I'll give you my full attention then. So I'm going to give you guys all of these things. That's the last slide. I hope that this was helpful. And this recording and all of the recordings will be at portal.theparenttdoctor.com. Most people haven't actually signed up here. So if you're in the book club, but you've never gone to the portal, I'll just send an email to everyone who's in the book club today to remind them how to get in there. Because I made this transition a few months ago from a different place where I was storing everything, and most people didn't get the memo on that. So I'm going to send out a message. When you sign in the first time, you create a password and you create a profile for yourself. It asks for an image. You don't have to put a picture of yourself if you don't want to put a real picture. It asks for a name. You don't have to put your real name if you don't want to. It can be anonymous, but it's a safe space. It's just us. It's HIPAA compliant, and I monitor the chat. It's kind of like a private Facebook group, but it's off of Facebook on my portal. So thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you next month. Next month, we're doing The Five Pillars of Parenting by Dr. Alyssa Pressman. She's actually a local psychologist here in LA who I've met before. So I might also ask her to join us if she's available, but I can't promise she will be, but I'll try. All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye.